Welcome back to New Rockstars. I'm Erik Voss, and this is a breakdown of Venom: The Last Dance. From Knull, the King in Black, to the history of the symbiotes and the Spider-Verse, to one very interesting detail about the MCU in this movie, we have to break down this final chapter of the Tom Hardy Venom trilogy scene by scene for all the Easter eggs and details you missed. And thank you to Boxu for sponsoring this video. We'll have more to say about their tasty treats later on. We have some great Venom-themed designs available at nerdriot.shop, our merch store, which make the perfect holiday gift option for that sticky dance partner in your life. We open this film on Knull, god of the symbiotes, imprisoned in his throne world of Klyntar, with his hands fused to his weapon, All Black, the Necro Sword. Voiced by Andy Serkis, who directed the second film of the series, Venom: Let There Be Carnage, and really Hollywood's go-to guy for this kind of thing, from Snoke to Gollum to Caesar to Kino Can't Swim Loy. Knull says this: "I am Knull, god of the void, slicer of worlds. Long ago, when light invaded my kingdom, my symbiote children betrayed me, imprisoned me here. At last, the Codex is being created. It is the key to my freedom. It will unlock this prison. I order you to search the corners of the universe until you find this key. Find me the Codex, and when I escape and annihilate every living planet and destroy my smeared offspring, I will reward you with your lives." Knull is the symbiote deity, the creator of all the symbiotes. He was created by Donny Cates and introduced in Venom Volume 4, Number 3 in 2018, and explored more fully in Cates' epic crossover storyline, King in Black, from 2020 to 2021, and King in Black gets referenced quite a bit in this film, and seems to be the event The Last Dance is laying the seeds for a future Sony film. In the comics, Knull occupies a realm called the Abyss, which is an existential chasm between the destruction of the 6th cosmos and the creation of the 7th cosmos. I know. Huh? In Marvel lore, the universe has gone through a number of life cycles, and before this existence, there was a 6th cosmos, which was then destroyed in a universe-wide big crunch, or rather a number of other explanations in different comics. Actually, Galactus, aka Gallon of Ta, was a survivor from that 6th cosmos who gestated in a cosmic egg to live on into the 7th cosmos, and we're gonna finally meet Galactus in Fantastic Four First Steps. The Celestials are cosmic beings who came from the 5th cosmos. The Celestials originally recruited Knull to be the King in Black, a cosmic caretaker for this new universe, but Knull, salty that his kingdom of darkness was being ignored, created a sword of living darkness and used it to decapitate a Celestial. He used the head as a forge to temper this sword into All Black, the Necro Sword. In the Marvel Comics, this was the same sword wielded by Gore the God Butcher from Jason Aaron's God of Thunder run in 2013, but in Taika Waititi's Thor: Love and Thunder in the MCU, Gore's sword in that movie is not all black, mostly because Marvel Studios is unable contractually to connect to symbiote mythology unless it's in movies that they are co-producing with Sony. Similarly, while in the comics the Celestial that Knull decapitates becomes Nowhere, James Gunn has said that the location of Nowhere in the MCU Guardians of the Galaxy movies was not a Celestial decapitated by Knull, and that's mostly because the first 2 Guardians of the Galaxy movies came out before Knull was even a thing. Knull in this opening refers to himself as Slicer of Worlds, and that's actually one of the monikers of All Black in the comics. In this way, it's kind of a synecdoche. Knull is saying that All Black is an extension of his very body, and in a way, he's not wrong. In these opening moments, we see several corpses of symbiotes entombed in the ground of Klyntar. These would likely be past experiments of symbiotes whom Knull created over the ages. In the comics, he would dump his failed creations in what was called the exoteric latitude, later known as the Exolon. Here, the bodies kind of serve as a warning to any other potentially mutinous creation, like I brought you into existence, I can take you out. This throne world is an artificial planet that Knull created from living darkness as he waged a reign of terror, deploying his legions to conquer planets, consume civilizations, extinguish stars. The reign of terror ended when 2 of Knull's symbiote dragons, named Grendel and Grendel's mother by the Danes of Earth, were stopped by Thor. And in that moment, the symbiotes bonded to kind hosts for the first time and learned basic decency, and then rebelled against Knull and imprisoned him in this throne world, which they named Klyntar, which was their word for cage. While the Nor and Gore lore is omitted here, something like that seems to be what Sony is going for. At some point in Knull's conquest, symbiotes bonded to good, decent life forms and realized, are we the baddies? And that's why Knull is particularly vengeful at Earth and the true mutualism of the symbiotic relationship between Venom and Eddie, why their Codex is the key to his imprisonment. Now, the symbiote Codex refers to the metaphysical connection between the symbiote and its host, specific link to the symbiote hive mind formed by trace amounts of the living abyss, kind of like a dual fingerprint that codes whatever makes this relationship unique. The consciousness consciousness of the host is preserved within the symbiote hive mind as a codex, making it a kind of afterlife for a dead host. And it presents some interesting metaphysical and spiritual implications in the comics for characters like Eddie Brock and Cletus Cassidy. But in this film, it seems like Eddie and Venom love each other so much that love and that light is what is trapping Knull in this living darkness. And you'll notice that on Knull's opening monologue, certain words and phrases echo, like, when the light invaded my kingdom, my symbiote children betrayed me, imprisoned me here. It is a key to my freedom. It will unlock this prison. And when I escape. Destroy my smeared offspring. Also smeared is a weird way to describe them. This echo seems like it's the sound of the hive mind itself, pulsating this message through the various Xenophages. Knull also says smeared offspring, which is just a gross choice of words that shows how disgusted Knull is with his progeny. The audience for this speech are the Xenophages. Introduced in Venom the Hunted in 1996, Xenophages are a feral alien species known for hunting symbiotes. They can shapeshift, they feel no pain, and they feast on the brains of symbiote hosts who become tastier to them the longer they've been bonded. This film stays true to their physical appearance, but omits the metamorphing aspect, but adds this kind of wood chipper effect wherein the flesh they consume is sprayed out the back of their heads, suggesting they're not feasting for sustenance, but really just in it for the flavor, kind of like the practice of Roman purging. Now, Xenophages are not specified to be creations of Knull in the comics. They also predated the introduction of Knull by 20 years or so, but it makes sense that Knull would create these as a subspecies of lesser intelligence than the symbiotes to prevent these from getting smart as well and rising up against him. The Xenophages can only see their targets when the symbiote and the host are bonded and the Codex is activated. At that point, they can move at relatively super speeds. Knull opens these portals to send the Xenophages across the universe. While he can traverse space instantaneously like this, as Celestials can, his imprisonment from his creations prevents him from being able to use this teleportation himself. But we must acknowledge that this abyss is not specific to any one universe. This film describes it as something surrounding the 688 universe. And because it is surrounding that universe, it must also be a non-universal buffer zone that surrounds all other universes of the multiverse as well. So while we transition from this setting to Earth, technically the Earth we start this movie in is the 616 MCU, the universe of the Spider-Man No Way Home post-credit scene. So I think they're saying that any universe that Tom Holland's Peter Parker lives in could also be a universe under threat by Knull, which sets up some implications for Spider-Man 4. They restaged that post-credit scene nearly line for line here, though they skip the references to Tony Stark and Hulk and jump right to the reference to Thanos.
Tell me again about your purple alien that loves stones. Because I tell you what, man, aliens, they do not love stones.
Eddie,
no, they do not love stones. You know what aliens love? Eating brains, because that's what they do.
The difference is now Tom Hardy says, your purple alien friend that loves stones. And so it hits a bit harder when the bartender, played by Christopher Fernandez, says,
Senor, he made my family disappear for 5 years.
Even though No Way Home was a Sony production co-produced by Marvel Studios, it remains a little odd that Sony opens this film in the MCU, referencing the blip, one of the most important events in MCU history. I think it's a signal that the threat Knull poses isn't just to Venom's universe of 688, but also potentially the MCU. And there's a very good chance that Knull could show up in Spider-Man 4, which will be set in the MCU with the Avengers. Tom Holland confirmed this week that Spider-Man 4 is happening and will begin production in summer 2025, which puts it on track for a 2026 release date. In the No Way Home post-credit scene, Eddie talks about going to New York to speak to this Spider-Man, which then leads to Venom standing Eddie up and saying, Eddie, we are drunk! And then Eddie glows and disappears, but here, there is no mention of Spider-Man, and Eddie glows, but now there is an added visual effect of a linear rift behind Eddie that pulls him backward. In the No Way Home post-credit scene, we just kind of see Christo's reaction, and then Eddie's gone. But one of the craziest details in this movie comes up right here. Before, we saw a wide shot of this beachside Mexican city. In the 616 universe of the MCU, it was a large urban sprawl with very tall skyscrapers. Now, I would assume this is Acapulco, based on the direction of the flight they later have to take to New York that would cross over the Grand Canyon in the Nevada desert. But this is definitely not Acapulco. It actually looks more like Rio de Janeiro in Brazil. Either way, it's a city that does not exist in our world. But when Eddie and Venom transition back to the 688 Venom universe, this city is not there, and in its place is a much humbler coastal town. So what the hell is this Sony movie establishing thinking about the state of Mexican tourism in the MCU? Are they acknowledging that the world of the MCU is more advanced and developed? After all, in the 616 MCU, Tony Stark did spend quite a bit of time during the blip in Mexico with Bruce Banner, helping him build that Mexican Gamma Lab that we saw in the She-Hulk series. Remember when Bruce was drunkenly recalling this to Jen, that Tony helped build that lab and that bar? So did Tony Stark lend some Stark resources to this city in exchange for them looking the other way and not interfering with Hulk? Did they just make the city nicer in the MCU to justify the Let There Be Carnage post-credit scene when Eddie and Venom teleport from an average hotel to a much more luxurious hotel in the MCU where the towels are folded like swans? I know I'm overthinking it. I just think it's a very peculiar detail, and I love it. Venom says, "We're home. I'm so done with this multiverse shit." Echoing Deadpool and Deadpool and Wolverine, even though all that multiverse shit led to Sony and Spider-Man No Way Home making $1 billion. Now, you'll notice this bar interior doesn't have the colorful lights that it had in the 616 MCU. Venom puppets Eddie to mix a drink set to the Champs' Tequila, the track that Pee Wee Herman dances to in the bar in Pee Wee's Big Adventure. And they see on the news from the San Francisco Bay Area that Eddie Brock is still being sought in connection to the death of Detective Patrick Mulligan, Stephen Graham's character in Let There Be Carnage, who was taken captive by Carnage and Shriek and was injured at Grace Cathedral, but left with a bit of a symbiote infection of his own.
Monsters.
But the fact that he's now reported to be dead from a completely made-up cause tells us that the forces behind the Imperium program are capable of media manipulation and making sure those broadcasts air worldwide. Eddie sees a miniature Statue of Liberty and considers returning to New York and mentions a corrupt judge who got him kicked out of the city, and he says that he still has a lot of dirt on this judge and could blackmail him into clearing his name. So in the 2018 movie, Eddie and Anne talked vaguely about this backstory.
But we don't want a
Repeat.
of the Daily Globe incident.
Ow, really?
Baby, you were run out of New York. I don't want you run out of San Francisco.
That was a nod to Eddie Brock's origin from Amazing Spider-Man number 300 in 1988, tying it to the 1985 Sin Eater storyline, in which Eddie Brock wrote for the Daily Globe and published the name of someone he assumed was the serial killer known as the Sin Eater, only for Spider-Man to catch the actual Sin Eater, Detective Stan Carter, which ruined Eddie Brock's reputation as a journalist. So Anne in that scene was really just cautioning Eddie about running with a conspiratorial story that could embarrass him professionally again. But this film suggests that there was more to the story, with some corrupt judge. So maybe Eddie was investigating a corrupt judge who gave out maximum sentences and insanely high bail, or maybe a judge who gave far too favorable rulings to organized crime, taking bribes, that kind of thing. So either some really hostile, aggressive cops or just the mafia made life in New York City inhospitable for Eddie. Venom says that he always wanted to see the Statue of Liberty, and anyone who wanted to see Venom join the fray in the final battle of No Way Home would agree. Venom leaves a coin behind on the bar top, stuck with a piece of his goo, creating a scenario similar to what we were left with in the 616 MCU, a piece of Venom goo left on the bar. This sample will get collected by Strickland later. That sample still remains at large in the MCU and could lead to an infection of Peter or MJ. Lethal protectors Eddie and Venom protect dogs being forced to fight in a dog ring. On the street, the wall to the left translates to "don't get lost" or "don't miss out." Eddie is wearing Crocs, and they're not even in sports mode. Venom beefs up the leg and kicks the first guy right across the room. The others begin unloading on Eddie, who is standing directly in front of the dog kennels. Please don't fire in that direction, or even Eddie stand in front of those kennels, encouraging gunfire in that direction. During this fight, one of the guys gets a plastic dog collar around his neck, and I love that because it's just like, yeah, it's a cone of shame. But the fact that they even have a cone of shame makes me think that at least one of these guys cared enough about the canine healthcare that they'd want to keep a dog from licking and irritating a wound, as opposed to the general Michael Vick approach of kind of just letting wounds heal or not with no care. In this great tag team move, Venom stretches Eddie across the room and guides him to dropkick this guy, and they tried to say their catchphrase.
We are.
We're Venom!
We are.
Venom!
No.
Oh!
Yeah, we
are. These two are never perfectly in sync because this pairing isn't meant to last forever, because a thing isn't beautiful because it lasts. Venom goes down the line to gobble up each of their heads. Just a reminder that Venom craves human brains because of the chemical phenylethylamine, which produces happiness and elation. This shot is pretty quick and there's no blood, so they can get away with a PG-13 rating. But imagine being the fourth guy on the line. He's like, oh, maybe he's gonna stop at 3. Nope. Oh, damn it. Eddie's relationship with Venom is obviously kind of complicated, but one of the nice things about having a symbiote is you get to experience some of the parts of symbiote culture that you'd miss out on otherwise. You know, like Venom Horses. Venom's fictional, but the joy of experiencing other food and cultures is very real. And that is exactly what you get from our friends over at Boxu. Boxu is a premium Japanese snack box that works with family businesses all over Japan to curate a new theme of authentic treats every month. The first snack box you get is Seasons of Japan. It's essentially a collection of all of Boxu's greatest hits, and it's packed with the most popular snacks and unique flavors from each season.
Oh, that is really good. Oh, the flavor is wonderful. You wouldn't expect this to have come out of a box, but it did. Boxu just gave me a wonderful little treat. Next, I'm going to try this white strawberry from the Nagano region of Japan. That is really, really good. Like a wonderful little candy. It also tastes like you're biting into a fresh strawberry.
And pro tip, Boxu makes a great gift. You would normally have to roam the streets of Japan to enjoy these treats, so really, it's a special experience that you can't just buy anywhere. We like to make a night of it and try all the treats together. If you want to treat yourself to some Japanese snacks and support new Rockstars, click the link in the description and use my code Rockstars to get $15 off your first Boxu order. Now, Eddie loses one of his Crocs during this fight as a dog rips it in half, setting up this recurring gag in the movie of Eddie always losing one or both of his shoes. We could see this as a Bruce Willis and Die Hard nod, but in this movie, the worst thing Eddie's feet have to go through is getting his open toes peed on in Vegas. So I see this one missing shoe motif as a Cinderella thing, like Eddie is getting in that one last dance before midnight with his Prince Charming. A CCTV camera spots Eddie, and the footage displays on a video screen in this interesting room observed by a man in the shadows who says, "There you are, kid me General Strickland." So this mystery figure is revisited throughout the film, implied to be some kind of man behind the curtain of the Imperium program, but rather than a situation room in the Pentagon or the NSA or the CIA, this room and this guy look like a kind of stereotypical Illuminati adjacent secret cabal. My mind goes to the Oscorp of the universe, or perhaps the Alchemax Corporation or Horizon or something like that. Some organization with deep pockets and deep ties to the surveillance state, whoever is funding the Imperium program to stay open despite the government shutting down Area 51. But the film never reveals who or what this is. General Strickland reports to a man in the shadows, and rather include a Coulson-esque shield reveal like what we saw at the end of Iron Man, it's like this movie forgot to resolve this recurring mystery. Also, I might be crazy, but this actor kinda sounds like Reed Scott to me. Yeah, Dr. Dan Lewis from the first two films, Anne Wayne's new boyfriend turned fiance who defied the smug, douchey new guy trope and ended up being a wholesome, helpful dude and Let There Be Carnage. I know it would make no sense for Dr. Dan to be running the powerful secret cabal behind the Imperium program, but I checked the credits of this film, and every actor with speaking lines is accounted for except this credit, Dr. Dan Lewis, Reed Scott. Why is Reed Scott in the credits for this movie? There are no scenes, no flashbacks, any sighting of Dr. Dan anywhere in this film. Now, looking back at the previous two films, there are just zero telltale signs that Dr. Dan would have any nefarious agenda behind what was clearly just going on with his character. And I just mentioned that because, you know, we saw Andrew Scott's Moriarty in the BBC Sherlock series, where he initially posed as a bumbling boyfriend, which was really just to get close to Sherlock before he revealed his true identity. Maybe that could be what they're going for here. Like Dr. Dan could have some secret link to Carlton Drake's Life Foundation all along and got involved with Anne just to get close to this threatening investigator Eddie Brock, and now it's going to be elevated to some kind of Norman Osborn type figure. But with the trim suit, the calm voice, and the monotone colors of these scenes, one possible explanation is that this is Mr. Negative. Mr. Negative was a Chinese gangster who gets captured by Silvermane and forced to take an experimental drug that gives him control over the Light Force and Dark Force. It's actually the same experiment that Cloak and Dagger go through. For this guy, though, it results in two identities. Mr. Positive, who goes by the alias of rich philanthropist Martin Lee, who does charitable things like founding the Feast homeless outreach organization that Peter Parker's involved with, but really moonlights as Mr. Negative, a very cool-looking villain who seeks to control the criminal underworld. Mr. Negative is just a visually striking figure, a major character in Sony's recent games, and a villain Spider-Man fans have been clamoring for recent years. It would make sense for this to be Mr. Negative. It would explain why he'd have so much power over General Strickland and Project Imperium, as this would just be another example of Chinese nationals having influence in the American military establishment, and could also explain why an explicit reveal for this character might have been omitted from this film. Sony is relying relying heavily on Venom the Last Dance's distribution in China, which has already seen higher than expected box office performance in the country in its opening week. And there has been a history of Hollywood studios altering their films to appease the Chinese Film Board, which in the past has objected to depicting government corruption in China. Chiwetel Ejiofor plays General Rex Strickland, leader of a strike team for the Imperium program. He hunts symbiotes who have arrived to Earth. Rex Strickland is another character who's introduced in Donny Cates' 2018 Venom run, a Vietnam vet turned super soldier, bonded with a symbiote that turns him into the Tyrannosaurus, thus the name Rex. Though we sadly do not see the Tyrannosaurus in this movie. I was so bummed. When Strickland finds the goo in the Mexican bar, he refers to it as viral shedding, which suggests that this is a process his team is familiar with, how some symbiotes break off pieces of themselves to latch onto new hosts, kind of like viruses. They take this poor bartender into custody, and Christopher Hernandez returns in the post-credit scene. Onto the nightmare memory of Dr. Teddy Paine in Juno Temple, her memory with her brother Thaddeus Paine. Thaddeus Paine is a scientist from the Venom the Hunger run in 1996 who is left unable to feel pain from an accident, causing him to have to use gloves with mechanical fingertips as he experiments on Venom. This movie adapts the character in a way that the brother, Thaddeus, dies after his twin sister, Teddy, is struck by lightning in a desert storm, causing the lightning to flow through her into him as they were holding hands. So this is the freak accident that leaves Teddy with emotional scarring and a bit of a residual sizzle in her hands. Thaddeus wears a shirt referencing Roswell 1947, referring to the conspiracy theories around the UAPs that crashed in Roswell, New Mexico, that were actually Army Air Force balloons, or that's what they want you to think. Teddy wakes from her dream and looks out at the Nevada desert. Interestingly, the trailer version of the shot includes a series of meteors streaking across the night sky, when in this movie, it's Strickland's Osprey returning to Area 51. So Teddy drives into work the next morning wearing Thaddeus's Roswell shirt, yes, a little brother's shirt, that probably is wearing down and not smelling too great, but it's her way of showing that she is living the life he should be living. She wears alien head earrings, and also it looks like just a paperclip earring. She hears a radio announcer reporting that the government is decommissioning Area 51, and she passes this mailbox covered in alien and conspiracy-related decals. This is the black mailbox, which actually exists in the real world along Nevada State Route 375, aka the extraterrestrial highway. It's a popular spot for road trippers hoping for a glimpse of Area 51 or UAPs or aliens. On this mailbox, though, is a sticker that I spotted that reads, "Bring Drake back." Now, it's probably not a reference to the dead reputation of a certain obliterated op of Kendrick, but rather, I suspect, a reference to Carlton Drake, Riz Ahmed's head of the Life Foundation from the 2018 Venom film, as a big tech CEO survivalist foreseeing Earth's environmental disaster and aiming to use symbiotes to adapt humans for space, who died in the Riot versus Venom battle on the Bay Area launch pad. It would make sense for there to be some conspiracy theories out there about this guy. On the surface level of Area 51, we see a big Chekhov's gun in the form of massive tanks of hyperacid solution that are being used to dissolve government hardware. We meet security guy Jim, who will later be one of the symbiote hosts in the final brawl. Teddy talks to him about how, despite rapidly changing global ecosystems, for 250 million years, cockroaches have withstood it all, setting up the weird little moment in the post-credit scene in which a cockroach finds the broken vial that contained the symbiote that becomes Agony. Teddy drives through a sand waterfall, which is wild in and of itself, and descends to the still active government base of Area 55, the Imperium program. In the comics, the brood symbiote Imperium is a term for the hive network of symbiotes created by Knull, so it just makes sense that they would codename this program that seeks and studies symbiotes Imperium. Clark Bacco plays another scientist, Sadie, which is also the name of a girl that Lasher bonds to in the 2019 Absolute Carnage comics. She wears a Christmas tree brooch that she says her mother made for her, foreshadowing the green and red colors of Lasher. They speak with Mulligan, whose symbiote infection takes the form of Toxin, which in this movie forms a turquoise green color, unlike his appearance in the comics. Many of the Area 51 scenes in this movie definitely recall the 1996 Independence Day film, specifically the scene where the president speaks to the alien who's using a scientist as a communication conduit. Toxin, speaking through Mulligan, tells them that the symbiotes coming to Earth are fleeing something and says, "A dark, cold sea around this universe." And he ends by roaring, "The darkness has teeth," which is a near direct quote from Donny Cates in King in Black, one of the more metal things that Knull says over the memory of him using all black to decapitate the Celestial. "The void breathes. The abyss has teeth, and shadows only grow in the light." Later in the film, Toxin tells them that the symbiote that Knull is targeting is, he says, the black one, which feels pointed, obviously to us humans, but based on the other symbiotes we meet with their vibrant plumages, it seems like Venom's black color is implied to be a reflection of what he told Eddie in the 2018 movie.
"On my planet, I am kind of a loser, like you.
Also, black as a color is really just like the absence of all other colors in the spectrum of visible light. Venom and Eddie cling to the side of a Mexican airliner called Que Onda, which translates to "What's up?" Venom winks at the passenger through the window, an homage to the Twilight Zone episode Terror at 20,000 Feet, starring William Shatner, and an episode directed by Richard Donner, director of Superman the movie. Eddie screams, and I love how Venom silences him by transitioning into a symbiote form mid-shout, causing the tongue to get caught by the wind. But binding like this is what causes the Codex to become visible by a nearby Xenophage. Both Eddie and Venom's reactions to the Xenophage when it jumps onto the back of the plane are just so good. Tom Hardy shrieks, "Ah!" and Venom screams this. They're able to evade the Xenophage, and the Xenophage gets chopped up in the jet engine, causing chunks to rain down to the ground. Venom jumps off the jet and forms a parachute. Eddie loses one of his boots. The chunks rain down onto the extraterrestrial highway as we meet Martin, played by Rhys Ifans, who, yes, played Dr. Kirk Connors, aka the Lizard, in The Amazing Spider-Man in 2012 and in Spider-Man No Way Home. His wife, Nova Moon, is played by Alana Ubach, who plays Sydney Sweeney's mother in Euphoria, and their kids are Echo and Leaf. Martin is kind of the Randy Quaid of Independence Day conspiracy theorist analog of this film. Venom explains to Eddie who Knull is, what the Xenophages are, and he genders the Xenophages as female, which I found interesting. And he talks about how the Codex works. Because Venom brought Eddie back to life in the first film, they are uniquely bonded in a way that could free Knull from his imprisonment. Since Venom cannot take his full form with Eddie without the Codex tracking signal activating, Venom binds with a horse. I love the texturing on Venom Horse, the way Venom's tendrils form the horse mane and the tail to make them look like a gentle wind is always blowing through them. Also, instead of hooves, notice that Venom ends the horse feet as just grasping claws, because it doesn't need hooves to run fast. He could just, slap those gooey Venom hands and run fast. Queen's Don't Stop Me Now plays as Venom Horse speeds across the desert. He takes Eddie over a cliff, and Eddie becomes separated, and Venom reaches the tendrils back up to grab Eddie and snatch him back down to him. This is a visual callback to the move in the 2018 film when Eddie took the motorcycle over the San Francisco hill, and Venom did the same thing to bring him back down to the motorcycle. Back at Area 51, Strickland sees the tanks of other symbiote samples of all different colors. He doesn't buy that they're seeking safe haven, and we see how they have been arriving to Earth via meteors over the years. Strickland flies his Osprey with this SEAL Team 6 style group hanging tethered, and somehow they don't get tangled. They drop down into the river with this motorized scuba gear ready to go. Venom latches onto a fish, then to a bigger fish, then onto a frog. Eddie tussles with one soldier who tries to shoot him, and he ends up shooting her. But to keep Eddie from drowning, Venom binds to him, alerting a Xenophage to their location and turning the soldiers against the Xenophage, allowing them to get away. Eddie meets Martin's family, who give him a ride to Las Vegas, and they sing a family sing-along of David Bowie's Space Oddity. Their son, Leaf, gives Eddie a chocolate bar, and Eddie tells Leaf not to be afraid because aliens aren't real. He lies to him. And Venom tells Eddie that he would be a good dad. This feels like a hypothetical nod to Eddie's son in the comics, Dylan Brock, who also binds with the symbiote and actually takes on the moniker of Codex. Since Dylan's mom is Anne Wayne and Michelle Williams is out of the picture and Tom Hardy is leaving this franchise, I don't know if we're ever going to get to Dylan Brock. Martin tells Eddie about the concept of the Eureka, saying there's a doorway in our minds that remains hidden until the moment of death. And while Eddie ponders this, as they arrive in Vegas, we hear Cat Stevens' Wild World. I just think it's an interesting song about the immature feelings we feel during a breakup, but actually knowing the way Cat Stevens writes his lyrics from the point of view of a speaker, kind of a reflection of the speaker himself, acknowledging that he's pretty immature. Like, remember you as a child, girl. He's not calling her a child, he's calling himself a child. And when you connect this with this idea of Eddie assuming he's already gone through that Eureka, I think Eddie has to realize in this movie that to really mature, he has to let go of this year-long fling that he's had with Venom, as much as Venom has meant to him. In Las Vegas, Eddie and Venom talk to this busker dressed as the Statue of Liberty, reminding us of that destination. Venom cites Rain Man, and this part of the film is definitely structured like the Vegas sequence of the 1988 Tom Cruise, Dustin Hoffman movie directed by Barry Levinson. It's really just a chance for some reckless fun and games on this road trip buddy comedy. And so the movie even seems to leave its own reality for a bit. Venom gets addicted to the slot machines. They run into Mrs. Chen, who just happens to be there, and they go back to her penthouse suite to dance to ABBA's Dancing Queen. But the Chris Favaro covers the version sung by the A-Teens in 2000. Why this version and not ABBA's original? Who knows? But I think it's important in a movie called The Last Dance to have some actual dancing in it. Strickland gets approval from the Mystery Man to take full control over the Imperium program, and he orders this Captain Forrest guy to assemble the Six, which for a moment seemed like it was going to be the Sinister Six, might be deployed or at least referenced in this movie, but no, it's just another group of 6 soldiers to dangle again into Vegas to extract Eddie and Venom while a Xenophage attacks. So we get to Area 51, Venom is separated from Eddie, but Sadie allows Venom to hitch a ride on her and her great Christmas tree brooch. Strickland moves in to kill Eddie to permanently end the Codex tracker and to stop Knull, and he calls Sadie Christmas just to direct our attention to that brooch again, but it is odd because earlier it was like a friendly bit of banter between the characters about Sadie's mother, and now he's just like openly hostile. Venom leaps off Sadie, jumps onto Eddie to protect him from Strickland's gunfire, and then 100 visual effects happen in rapid succession for the next 20 minutes of this movie. A Xenophage shows up right away and unleashes hell. It eats Toxin and Mulligan. The creatures tumble onto the main lobby of the lab. Venom gets pinned down, and Sadie unleashes all of the other contained symbiotes from a master switch, and they start bonding with scientists. Sadie gets a green symbiote with red streaks and tendrils, which is the form of Lasher. That security guy Jim gets bound to a pudgy symbiote, and I kind of feel bad for Jim that the symbiote has a tummy. The scientist with glasses that Sadie had talked to earlier is a symbiote that's a pale periwinkle color that kind of reminds me of Scorn. I thought for a second maybe it was Anti-Venom, but I don't know. I kind of feel like they'd save Anti-Venom for a version of Flash Thompson in a future film. A couple symbiotes leap into each other, forming a multi-headed symbiote, which I think is meant to be hybrid, which in the comics is a fusion of Riot, Agony, Lasher, Phage, and Scream. And if Lasher and Agony appear in this mix, I assume Scream and Phage are also here as well. The brawl spills out onto the surface level of Area 51, embroiling Martin and his family, who should not be here. This guy is a terrible father. Eddie introduces Leaf to Venom and makes him feel less scared of aliens, and they save the family from the falling guard tower. While the symbiotes dogpile on one of the Xenophages, Strickland blows up the whole dogpile with an RPG, killing poor Jim, it looks like. Lasher tells Strickland that they're not the bad guys, but the Xenophage reassembles and emits a beacon to summon Knull to send more Xenophages to Area 51. Eddie and Venom lead a chase on a motorcycle and set up this impressive combo move as they drive up a helicopter blade as a ramp and then bring Lasher behind them, who grabs 2 of the other blades and decapitates a Xenophage. Rex gets seriously wounded, and Eddie gets seriously wounded, and Eddie and Venom realize that they cannot beat the Xenophages. Venom absorbs all the Xenophages into his mass and spits out Eddie, protecting him with a metal hatch. Venom makes Strickland activate the acid shower to dissolve himself and the Xenophages, and he tells Eddie goodbye, but only for now. And he reaches a tendril out to touch Eddie's hand, which is kind of a creation of Adam visual. Strickland detonates a grenade and blows up the structure. The roar emitted actually reminds me of the explosion of the Antarctic facility in John Carpenter's The Thing, the alien roar that bellows out from that fire. To get Sadie to safety, Teddy crushes the vial from her pocket containing another symbiote of purple color, turning her into Agony with long locks. I suppose the idea is that Teddy has been carrying that agony in her soul ever since her brother's death. Agony here emits electricity that seems to be connected to the lightning that Teddy received, but Agony does not have this kind of electric power in the comics. Eddie wakes up in recovery, thinking it was all a dream, and tries to talk to Venom, but gets no response. A general, played by Martin McDougall, tells him his record is cleared and gives him the thanks of a grateful nation. And Eddie returns to New York City. Presumably that corrupt judge was taken out by the Imperium program, or by Mr. Negative. Like Wiz Khalifa's See You Again, playing over the end of Furious 7, here Maroon 5's Memories plays over a montage of Eddie's memories with Venom from the previous 2 films, encompassing what this movie established was really just one short year, but that would also mean that we're still in around 2018 to 2019, which would make Maroon 5's Memories, which came out in 2018, a less dated needle drop. Eddie says, "I used to say I live my life a quarter mile at a time, and I think that's why we're brothers." I'm just kidding, doesn't say that. He just looks out at the Statue of Liberty, and he remembers how he told Venom that the statue was meant to welcome refugees to a new world. And that still could be what the Statue of Liberty means to any symbiotes who are escaping Knull's wrath. While Tom Hardy and director Kelly Marcel have indicated that this is the end of Tom Hardy's Eddie Brock, the story of the symbiotes and the King in Black Knull, they say, will continue. That could end with Peter Parker taking the place of Eddie Brock in the King in Black comic storyline to power up into Captain Universe, combining Silver Surfer's board empowered with the Enigma Force and Mjolnir to create a badass battle axe. Does Destin Daniel Cretton want to go that cosmic for Spider-Man 4? We'll see. I go into this more in my other video breaking down the 2 post-credit scenes of this movie. Go check that out. Comment down below with your thoughts. Follow me at EA Voss and subscribe to all 3 channels in the New Rockstars network for breakdowns and news coverage of everything you love. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.